Maharaj, you will come after that. Om Namah Shri Yatirajaya Vivekananda Suraye Satchit Sukha Swarupaya Swamine Tapaharine. Namaste, everybody, and welcome to a new edition of Prabuddha Bharata's Conversations with Authors. Today we have a very special guest, but before we introduce him, I wish to give a couple of updates of the latest news for Prabuddha Bharata. One thing is that we're very happy to announce that at the request of many of you, we now have a digital version of Prabuddha Bharata which is available. It's a separate subscription, and to subscribe, you have to go to our website. But for those of you who do not wish to receive a physical copy, but receive just a digital copy, we have now joined a platform called Magster, and you will be able to do so. So that's one piece of good news. And the second thing before we begin, I just wanted to again talk about that we have released our new special January edition. It's entitled Living a Meaningful Life in a Digital World. It's available for those of you who have not purchased it. I just want to just say a couple of words about it. I think it's one of our best issues in years, and it deals with cutting edge issues about digital technology, the impact it is having on our lives. Many times we don't understand it. And also it begins the discussion of solutions. And so we get many different perspectives, neurologists, psychologists, teachers, senior monks. And I think I'm so impressed with this particular article that I have in mind that this year we're going to be having some virtual conferences, hosting different panels of authors who have written for Prabuddha Bharata in the special January issue, so that we can discuss these issues in further detail. Now, I'd just like to introduce our speaker today. His name is Revered Swami Tyaganandaji Maharaj. He's I would say one of our best speakers in our order, and he's the minister in charge of the Vedanta Society of Boston. And he's also the Hindu chaplain for the Ivy League schools, Harvard University and MIT University. In other words, he gives guidance to many of the best young minds in America. Before being posted in Boston, USA, he was the editor in charge of our magazine, Vedanta Kesari, I believe for about 11 years. He's also the author of numerous books, which we will post the link for at the end of his talk. On a personal note, I first met Revered Maharaj in Hollywood, and one thing unique about his speaking style, it is said that there's at least two different types of public speakers. One is the type that speaks to a large audience, but there's an equally effective type that speaks to a large audience, but it's more conversational in nature. And so Revered Maharaj has this style, a very personal style in any talk, in any lecture. And another thing he does is, even though he's such a Pandit in Sanskrit, he simplifies everything in simple language and lucid language so that we are able to digest these complex Vedantic ideals and practice them in our own lives. So I would suggest that if you can, take notes what he's going to speak today. And afterwards, if you have questions, some of you can email those questions to us and we can forward them to Revered Maharaj. So without further ado, I would like to request Swami Tyaganandaji Maharaj to enter and give his talk.
Oh, thank you, Swami Chidekanandaji, for that very generous introduction. And thank you to Advaita Ashrama for this opportunity to share some of the thoughts, especially about the article that appeared in the Prabuddha Bharata.
Yes, before you continue, Maharaj, I just want to let everybody know, so Revered Maharaj wrote an article which appeared in our January 2020 special issue. It's entitled "The One and the Many Are Not Two." So, on its face, it seems almost like a contradictory, like a paradox. Maharaj's title. So, Maharaj, I would first, for the sake of our audience and for our people who have not read the article, can you please give a synopsis of the article?
Yeah, I will try to do that. But before that, I would like to fe- express my great appreciation for the good work that Prabuddha Bharata has been doing. It has had a profound influence on my life, even when I was a student. Uh, so much of what I have learned has come from different sources, and definitely Prabuddha Bharata was and continues to be one among them. And it's a really a tremendous source. And of course, started by Swami Vivekananda himself, um, the power that it has and the power that it shares continues to uplift people everywhere. So I'm very grateful for that and very happy to be with you all here. So regarding this article that I wrote on the many and the one are not two, the idea behind that was the effort needed to make even the highest wisdom available in as simple a term as possible. One of the things that we see among the teachings of these great masters, of course, Sri Ramakrishna in the Gospel, the Conversations of Holy Mother, Swami Vivekananda's complete works, and also of these other great ones of the past. You read about the parables of Jesus or the teachings of the Buddha, you will see that these highest of teachers gave this profound wisdom in the simplest of terms. And then sometimes the explanations that come later on or the philosophies that get built up around their teachings later on, sometimes those philosophies can become more complicated, but the original teachings themselves are very simple. And so, while there is utility in presenting the wisdom in a very scholastic, intellectual way with constant references to scriptures, etc., that's definitely reaching a certain audience. But it's also important to be able to express that same idea in a very simple, easily reachable way. There's one quotation of Swami Vivekananda that I'm very fond of, and I would like to read it to you. So, this is what Swamiji said in a letter he wrote to his Madras disciple, Alasinga, in the February of 1896. So, these are Swami Vivekananda's words. He said, to put the Hindu ideas into English and then make out of dry philosophy and intricate mythology and queer starting psychology a religion which shall be easy, simple, popular, and at the same time meet the requirements of the highest minds is a task only those can understand who have attempted it. The dry, abstract Advaita must become living, poetic in everyday life. Out of hopelessly intricate mythology must come concrete moral forms, and out of bewildering yogiism must come the most scientific and practical psychology. And all this must be put in a form so that a child may grasp it. That is my life's work. So, years ago, when I read this really struck a chord in the heart. And so, while we can never come to the have that that power that Swami Vivekananda had to express the teachings in a simple way and a powerful way, but I think it's nevertheless an effort worth making for all of us who admire Swami Vivekananda and follow his teachings. can we express these teachings in a simple way? So that was really at the back of my mind when I thought whether it's possible to express the basic insights of Advaita, the non-dualism, in an intelligible way so that even a little child may be able to understand it. Now, I don't know whether I've succeeded, but it's definitely a sincere effort that I made in that direction. So I would like to very briefly mention a few of the points that I have tried to highlight in that essay. It begins with the birth of religion, and it's a speculation. How did religion even begin in the world? And it might seem natural also that it began with questions about the world, because right from the moment we are born, the world is what we encounter around us. And so at some point, the questions can come about what is this world? Where did it come from? Was it always there, or did it begin at some point? And then, of course, as we grow older, we said, well, God made this world. God made this world, then where is God? How is God? And how did God make this world? Now, all these different kind of questions can come in the minds. And human minds have thought about it for a long time. And fleshing out the details of how this world could have come, when it could have come, why it came, eventually may have taken the form of the different religious traditions that we have in the world today. And it might be possible to look at it this way, that every religious tradition primarily deals with these three basic points, you could say. There is me, that the individual, then there is the world I live in, and if there is anything beyond that, the generic term we use is God, the transcendent being, the source of all this. So three entities: God, the world, and me. And every religious tradition tries to express itself regarding who am I really? What is this self? Who is this individual? What is this world? Who is God? And how are the three related? What is the nature of their relationships among one another? And that kind of a complex relationship between them gets described in different ways. And because it gets used and expressed in different ways, using different symbols, different language, different examples, it sometimes looks radically different. Now, broadly, we could say that the relationships between these three entities, God, world, and me, if these three remain forever apart, connected in some way, but still distinct entities, God, the world, and me. If they continuously and always remain distinct, then we could broadly classify that way of thinking into a dualistic way of thinking. In Sanskrit, they simply call it Dvaita. Now, some traditions say, yes, these three are distinct, but not so different, not so far apart that they are distinct and yet connected. It's like you look at the tree, and the tree has its parts. There is the trunk, there are the branches, there are the leaves, there are the flowers, and there are the fruits. Now, these are all distinct parts, and yet, as a tree, there is a unity there. They are united. So the next way of describing the relationship is they are different, but not so different. So they are one and also different. And so that sometimes gets called as the Vishishtadvaita, the qualified non-dualism. And the third way this relationship gets described is that, well, they look different, they appear different, but really they are not different. Really, it's all one. So that's what they call the non-dualistic school of thought. So these are very broad categories. Dualism at one end, non-dualism at the other end, and this middle qualified non-dualism or qualified dualism in the middle. Now, each of these schools of thought also have their sub-schools with some subtle nuances. So there are similarities and differences. So that there are the Vedantic philosophical tree, if you like, is broadened out so much over thousands of years that there are several schools of thought within it. The question that can sometimes come is, which is my school, or which is the one that I should follow? And normally, it's not so much a decision that's made intellectually. We naturally tend to gravitate towards the way of thinking that best resonates with our head and heart, usually with our heart. People like to think that they are very logical and rational, but usually we first decide, oh, this is what I like. And then later we reason our way towards it. And somehow then the chronology gets scrambled. And then we think, I first reasoned it out and then I accept it. But I think emotions play a much larger part in our life than we are willing to admit. Now, among these three broad schools of thought, what I tried to do in that essay was focus primarily on the Advaita path, the non-dual path. And that is because it makes a very rather startling, enigmatic claim that the diversity that we see is not really there. So it totally contradicts our experience. And which is why it's kind of worth looking into. Now, if it doesn't exist, all these many don't exist, then the natural question would be, well, how do I see it? And because I see it, they are real. And so one of the important things that we need to pay our attention to is, when we say something is real, what does it really mean? What is reality? And so the definition of real becomes very important in our understanding of the world. So what are the ingredients of reality? When would we characterize something as real? And one thing is obvious. Well, if something has to be real, it has to exist. If it doesn't exist, then you can't say it's real. So existence is definitely an important ingredient. But also, that existence, or what appears as existence, must be very stable. You just can't, like a flash, you see it and it disappears. Then you wonder whether it's real or not. So it has to endure over a period of time. And that is how eventually these Vedanta thinkers came with a simple equation that Satya, that which is real, equals Mithya, that which is eternal. So there is, according to them, no such thing as a temporary reality. If something appears for a time and then disappears after a while, then you can't say, well, it was real for 2 hours. Well, you could say it, but deep down you know, well, it's not really real. Because, just take the example of our dreams. While we are dreaming, and let's say someone sleeps for 6 to 8 hours, and if you're sleeping for more than 8 hours, better reduce it. Yeah, sleeping for more than 8 hours is probably not a good idea. So generally they say between 6 to 8 hours is fine. So when we dream, and sometimes they say we don't just dream one dream at night. We might probably dream several dreams every night. And the dream that we remembered usually tends to be the dream that we had just prior to our waking up. Even if we just had one dream in the night, that dream lasted for, like, say, maybe 3 hours, 4 hours, if you're lucky. Now, in the dream, it didn't appear like, oh, this was a world which lasted for only 3 hours. It just appears to be like a permanent world. But when we wake up, we know that, oh, this was just a dream. Now, why is it that we are able to dismiss our dreams, but not dismiss the waking experience as easily? because dreams had a beginning, they had an end. They were there for a few hours. If it was a pleasant dream, you had a good free movie show that you saw. If it was a terrible dream, then you suffered a little bit, but when you wake up, you're relieved, like, oh, it was just a dream. So we are able to dismiss dreams as unreal because they don't last. But we cannot dismiss the waking world in the same way because it seems to have a persistence. We continue to see the same world day after day after day, but we don't see the same dream night after night after night. And so that is why we know that even if we consider dream to be like real for a time, it's not really real. Or at least we could say the world that we see when we are awake is more real than the dream. So dream is somehow less real. But if we look deeply into the experience of both dream and waking, we see they're not much different. In fact, there's hardly any difference, because just like dreams last for a short time, the waking world lasts for a short time too. I mean, come to think about it, the dream ends when I wake up and starts when I sleep. The waking world ends when I sleep and starts when I wake up. Totally identical. In the dream, everything appears real to me. In the waking state, everything appears real to me. When I wake up, the dream world totally disappears. When I sleep, the waking world totally disappears. There is no difference at all.
Well, Maharaj, let me just interrupt at one point. But could we say that in the waking state, I could recall the dream that I had.
Sure.
I could sometimes recall the dream, but in the dream state, I don't think normally we can recall the existence of our waking state. Would you say that's correct?
Yes. But all this, remember, you are having the discussion in the waking state now. Now, let's say I'm dreaming. Okay. In my dream, also there are days and nights. In the dream, also, I go to sleep. Right.
Okay.
And in my sleep, I might dream. So in my dream world, I sleep and I dream. Then in my dream world, I wake up. And am I not able to recall the dream that I had in my dream world?
What I was mentioning, Maharaj, is that when in the dream world, recalling that our waking world, like when you go to sleep, at that time, seeing this conversation we're having right now, remembering that in your dream and seeing that as your dream.
No, what I'm saying is that in the dream, you don't know it's a dream. In the dream, when you are awake in your dream, you don't think that, oh, this is just my dream awakening. You think it's a daytime, right?
Right. That's true.
Everything that happens in the waking state happens in the dream state also. What does not happen in the waking state does not happen in the dream state also. So there is no point of distinction between the two. I'm not sure whether I made myself clear. But think about it. It'll make sense.
Yeah. Right.
In fact, and this is not something that we could say it's only some great discovery only Vedanta has made. Any great thinker in any part of the world at any point in history, if you think deeply, this would make sense. In fact, in Plato's writings, you find him saying, he puts it in a negative way. He said that no point can we be absolutely sure that we are not dreaming. And so that's exactly the same idea, that dream and a waking state, they look different when you are kind of entrenched in one state. But if you look at the two objectively, there is really no difference between the two. In fact, it also comes back to the definition of dream. Why is a dream called a dream? Why is a dream different from the experience I'm having right now? And that is because dream means seeing something that is not there. Right? In my dream now, I'm now sitting here in Boston, but I might dream last night and maybe find myself in Hawaii or find myself in Timbuktu in Africa, for instance. Now, And I wake up morning and say, wow, that's not really there, because I wasn't really there. I was just lying in my bed here. So dream means seeing something that is not there.
Okay,
Now,
seeing something.
and therefore, waking state, what is the reality? What do the scriptures say? They say, well, everything is really one. Brahman alone exists. So right now, when I'm seeing this multiplicity, which the wise people have said doesn't really exist, I am seeing something which is not there. And so therefore, the waking state is also a dream. Even in my deep sleep state, I'm seeing something that is not there. I'm still present in my deep sleep, experiencing my ignorance, experiencing a joy. That's why I wake up in the next morning and say, oh, I slept so well, I didn't know anything, and I feel so happy. So all the three states, I'm experiencing what is not really there out there. And therefore, the Upanishad itself, although we kind of generally say there are three states, the Aitareya Upanishad, I believe, says, Tatra Trayaswapnaha, there are three kinds of dreams: the waking dream, the dream, and the deep sleep dream. And if we, once we begin start thinking in this way, then we can easily extend it. That death is a dream. And if you find yourself in heaven, or God forbid, in hell, a heaven dream, a hell dream. You find yourself in Suryaloka, Brahmaloka, Chandraloka. All of these can be a series of dreams. So we can see our present existence as one dream following another dream. Waking dream, dream, deep sleep dream, eventually death dream, and then some dreams, some celestial world, a dream of being born again and going through this whole cycle again. All of these are dreams. And how long will these dreams continue? They will continue until I wake up. When I wake up, all the dreams will end. So although we might seem as if we go through these three stages in a 24-hour period, spiritually speaking, we're all really dreaming. And this dream will end only when we wake up. And that waking up, and the word Buddha was not his name. He was Siddhartha, Gautama Siddhanta, but he's called Buddha. Buddha really means one who is awake, the awakened one. And so that's the goal, that each of us should become a Buddha. And so what is then, once these dreams cease, when I wake up, what do I see? And the word that gets used in Vedanta is Brahman, that Brahman alone exists. And what is Brahman? Brahman is just that pure consciousness. If we see dream as a separation from ourselves, for instance, the real me, or at least what I think of me as a real me now. So when I go to bed at night, I switch off the light, I lie down in my bed. For some time, I know who I am. For some time, I know where I am. And then suddenly, at some point, sleep comes. I forget who I am. I forget where I am. And then that's when the dream begins. So for the dream to start, it's important that I forget who I am.
Maharaj, before you go on, I just wanted to ask that because you were made, I think Shankara, I mentioned this in the question I had submitted to you. Shankara, in his criticism of Buddhist idealism, did he not make the argument in his bhashya that the waking state is more real than the dream state?
Yeah, all in a very relative sense. I don't see any intrinsic difference between Shankara and his Paramaguru Gaudapada. It's just that looking at the same phenomenon from two different perspectives. Shankara, I would say, kind of comes down a little bit to help us understand from our perspectives. We know how tough it can be to understand the distinction between waking and dream, because our natural instinct is to think, well, waking is definitely more real. And then there is a difference between the two. So Shankara kind of says, okay, if that's what you think, and that's how he speaks about these three levels of reality: the Pratibhasika Satta, the Vyavaharika Satta, and Paramarthika Satta. So he speaks, and in fact, you will see an echo of that in Swami Vivekananda's words when he says, we are not going from error to truth, but from truth to truth, from truth that is lower to truth that is higher. Now, I mean, the moment you add adjective, say, oh, truth that is lower to truth that is higher, what it really means is that which is higher is the real truth. And the lower truth is not really the truth, but you kind of, when you are at that stage, it kind of appears as a truth to you. So that is what really Shankara is saying. That, well, right now, yes, the waking state there is in one perspective, in one way of looking, the waking state does appear to be like more real than the dream, or it's a different from the dream. But then when you see his argument further, you say, ultimately, when he says, ekameva dvitiyam, then he's not making any distinction between the two. And so I don't see any distinction between the teachings of Shankara and of Gaudapada.
And then what is the other, just wanted to get this, the other question in this light. Sometimes some people argue that Sri Ramakrishna, in the Kautamrita, he had mentioned that Brahma Shakti Abhed. So Brahman and Shakti are inseparable. And his some scholars even argue that after coming back from that Brahma Jnana state, seeing this world of multiplicity, seeing it saturated with consciousness, not as a dream state, is there some contradiction between that and Shankara's point of view?
No, I mean the word abheda means not different. Bheda is difference. Abheda is not different. So when Sri Ramakrishna says Brahma and Shakti are abhed, what he's saying is Brahma and Shakti are not different. And in his teachings, he makes it very clear that just as you cannot separate the whiteness of milk from milk, you cannot separate the movement of a snake from the snake. You cannot separate the power of the divine from the divine. And in another place, Sri Ramakrishna also said that which people call Brahma, I call Kali. So I don't see that he's making any distinction between the two. He's just saying, if you see it as Brahman, the way I see it is Kali.
Right.
And of course, we can never forget his training under Totapuri. When he had to reach that non-dual consciousness, he said he had to cut the form of the Divine Mother with a sword of discernment, sword Viveka Khadga. He had to do that in order to go to Brahman. He could have just said, well, Ma Kali can remain and Brahma can't remain. But then if they are abhed, the two cannot remain at the same time. The two are one. That's the point, right? And so I don't see any contradiction there. Yeah. Also, seeing the world after enlightenment, seeing the world is not a problem. The world actually is not a problem in itself. The problem is seeing the world as real. That's the problem. If you don't see the world as real, and that's perfectly fine. I mean, think about it this way. If there is a painful dream and we are upset or disturbed by it, that's because in the dream we don't know it's a dream. If in the dream, if you know you're just dreaming, no matter how terrible things are happening there, you won't be affected by it. I mean, sometimes people go and watch movies or television programs which are extremely violent or terrible or distressing. But so long as you're sitting with the popcorn in your hand and munching on it, and then you say, oh, it's such a beautiful acting and great photography, you are able to enjoy even terrible things that are happening on the screen because you know it's not real. But if you get sucked into that movie so much that you forget the popcorn in your hand, you kind of become a part of that story, then you're affected by it. And some well-made movies, people do forget. They get so absorbed into the story. And you could say that something like that has happened to us. People nowadays pay extra money to go and to watch 3D movies. And the tickets here are more expensive than just a regular movie. And now even about the virtual reality and all of that stuff. But there is this kind of a 3D movie available to us free of cost right from the time we are born. we can really enjoy it. And no one can make a better movie than this world, because the producer, director, music, everything is provided by the Lord. And God himself has provided this. Who can be a better director than the divine being? Now, but we don't enjoy this movie so much all the time because it doesn't appear like a movie. It appears very real. And so that's the thing. So after enlightenment, the description that we find in different books, the enlightened being, we say, well, comes down. Well, there is no up and down, but we can say, well, comes down and then sees the world. And that's fine. The only difference is, even when they see the world, they see the oneness behind the world. The unity is more real, and the world is mere shadow. In fact, one of the first experiences Swami Vivekananda had is Narendranath when he went to Sri Ramakrishna. One of the early experiences exactly like that. When Sri Ramakrishna touched him, everything just didn't disappear totally. It disappeared, but he also said, Swamiji said, you're able to see all these forms, but somehow they didn't appear like very real. Right. So there is this kind of a mixture of appearance, recognition that it is an appearance, and therefore not being affected by it.
So Martin, let me continue on that. Then, like Swamiji talked about this concept that Atmano Mokshartam Jagat Hitaya Cha, and also that if we take this entire world as a dream, then this concept of not compassion, empathy, and feeling oneness with others, won't that shrink? Swamiji himself talked about the concept of expansion of heart. And so looking at that from this Advaitic practice of seeing the world as a dream, how does that come about? Because then we're having more anashakti, detachment towards the world. You understand what I'm saying? So how does that, can you please explain that?
Now, to see the world as dream is not merely an intellectual gymnastic. It's possible to just sit and say, oh, this world is a dream, and then go about most of the time as if it's very real. That's not Advaita. Now, in order to actually experience the world as dream, I need to have empathy. I need to go and help the needy. Because as long as the ego is strong, I can never experience the world as a dream. I will continue to see the appearance as real. If I have to experience the appearance as an appearance, there has to be purification of the heart. Chitta Shuddhi. Okay. Now, if the heart has to be purified, the ego has to get out. The ego can't be just sitting there. And if the ego is strong, then I'm never going to experience that reality. Now, if that ego has to go, there has to be this unselfish living. There has to be a way to serve others, empathize with others. You see? And before enlightenment, we need to strive to do this, because the ego, as a result of the habit acquired over God knows how many previous lives, the ego is pretty strong. And so the tendency is to do everything in a self-centered way. But if I can push back against that tendency and try to think of the other person before I think of myself, it's then that there is some chance that I'll be able to see things clearly. That's why in North India, when sadhus meet, they'll ask one another, like, Nazar saaf hai? Are you able to see things clearly? They're just talking about this eyesight. They're thinking about seeing things as they are. And so therefore, empathy or service, as Swamiji said, Jagat Hitaya Cha, done in the right way, in a spirit of karma yoga, that'll open my eyes. That'll make me Sukshmadarshi. That'll give me that ability to see subtle things in life. And so now, for the enlightened being, we might say, well, an enlightened being sees nothing is real. Why would an enlightened being help? Now, an enlightened being helps not because, oh, I must go and help others, not out of a sense of duty. An enlightened being helps because an enlightened being cannot but help. So, I mean, sometimes I like to think of is this way. We think an enlightened being is a free being. And we might say, well, not quite free. In other words, if an enlightened being sees suffering somewhere, the enlightened being has no freedom not to go and help. And the enlightened being will naturally go and help because that's their nature. Shankara says in the Vivek Chudamani, Vasantavat lokahitam charantaha. When spring comes, when the Vasanta season comes, flowers sprout, the plants start growing. It makes us happy. When the sun rises in the morning, the sun doesn't say, it's my duty to go and give light to the world. The sun does. That's the nature of the sun, to give light. So it's the nature of an enlightened being to help, to love, to serve. So they don't do it out of a sense of duty. So that's the difference. So I don't think that an effort to see the world as a dream will hamper or will hurt our need to. If it does, if someone says that, oh, this world is a dream, it's not real, I shouldn't go and help anybody, I don't need to help these people, that's what's undigested Vedanta is. And that's a big problem, because that's the philosophy of convenience, to kind of do things. I don't feel like helping anyone, and so I say, well, it's a dream, I won't help. And such people are never going to experience that oneness.
Okay. Wanted another, before you get back, like I mentioned in our new issue, we dealt with this living a meaningful life in a digital world, and I mentioned this to you in one question. Now this concept of Facebook, even this, I don't think you might have heard metaverses there. This virtual reality is becoming more and more real. Where does that fit into this three concepts of Vyavaharika, Pratibhashika, and Pranamartika? Is this, where would you classify this? Where does this fall under?
Well, definitely not Paramarthika.
Okay.
Well, I mean, let's first kind of get those concepts clarified. So I did say about a lesser truth to a higher truth. And that's why we find in Shankara's teachings and those who came after him, sometimes the levels of reality described as an apparent reality, pratibhasika, such as dreams. The reality of dreams is pratibhasika. They're apparent. It's not like really real, but it appears real as long as I am seeing it. The second level of reality is the vyavaharika. That's what we might call it the relative reality, the reality of the waking state. And that's the distinction we spoke about earlier, about every morning we wake up, see the same world, every night we don't see the same dream. And so from one perspective, they appear to be two different states. And so dreams are called as apparent reality. The waking world is called a relative reality. And then there's, of course, the ultimate Brahman, my true nature, which is the Paramarthika Satya. That is the absolute reality. Now, whenever an adjective gets added, we have to always be a little bit on the alert. Because, I mean, think about it this way. Either a thing is real or it's not real. That's the distinction, right? And so it's, well, it's only apparently real, relatively real, and absolutely real. And then now you have this virtual reality. Why are we adding these adjectives? In fact, there is this idea about the two kinds of knowledge, aparavidya and paravidya. And aparavidya is sometimes called lower knowledge, and paravidya is called higher knowledge. And then the Mundaka Upanishad then makes a distinction between these two and says how even the Vedas and all kinds of other knowledges, they all come under aparavidya, lower knowledge. And then yaya tadaksharam adhigamyate, that knowledge through which the imperishable is directly experienced, that is higher knowledge. Now, the word knowledge is used in both the places, higher knowledge, lower knowledge. But why these adjectives, higher and lower? And then Shankara points out in his commentary, lower knowledge is ignorance. Now, if you just say, well, this is all ignorance, people are going to be shocked. You say, oh, no, wait a minute, you can't call it ignorance. And say, all right, then it's kind of a concession. Say, okay, it's lower knowledge. So that's essentially how it is. What Vedanta says is Brahman alone is real, or in theistic language, God alone is real. Now you say everything else is unreal. Then people are going to be like shocked and saying, well, it doesn't make sense to us. Then we say, oh, all right. Then, this called some relative reality. And then some of these are like apparent reality, to kind of a concession, making a concession. Now, unreal itself can be expressed in two different ways. And there are two different Sanskrit words for it. The sat is real, unreal is asat in Sanskrit. There is also another word which often gets used, and it's called Mithya. Now, so what is the distinction between asat, unreal, and Mithya, apparently real? And so the distinction sometimes they make is that if something is unreal but appears real for some time, then you call it Mithya. In Sanskrit, they say, Yat asat bhasamanam, that which appears as real, but is really unreal. You call it Mithya. Now, there are certain things which cannot even appear as real. And in the books usually used to give this old examples, which probably today may no longer work. In the old books, we see distinctions such as Shashashringa, a rabbit with the horns. You say, well, that's no one has ever seen a rabbit with horns. Today, we can't really say that with all kinds of playing around with genomes and DNA, and maybe it's possible to grow horns on a rabbit. So that example is kind of outdated, you could say. But there is one, for instance, think about a square circle. No one has seen a square circle, and you doubt anyone will ever see a square circle. So a square circle is not even Mithya, it's just asat. So again, you're making the distinction between asat and Mithya, and that's why the world is called Mithya, because, well, it appears as real. It never not appears. And so, yeah, so that's the distinction. But really, Mithya is nothing but unreal. Similarly, all these different levels of reality, including now, coming back to your social media and this virtual reality, you can put them anywhere you want. Just recognize they are not absolutely real. I mean, think about it this way. Why is this waking world not a virtual reality? We are already living in a virtual reality. So the only distinction we could say is that in order to experience this kind of modern versions of virtual reality, you might have to put some goggles or some kind of a glasses over your in order to experience this virtual reality. And presently, this reality that we are seeing, we're already putting it through the glass of our mind. So we have an inbuilt virtual reality device implanted within us, because of which we are seeing the world, experiencing dreams. Now, in addition, all the social media and Facebook and whatever else you can think of, they are saying, over the inner glasses you already have of the mind, we're going to give you one more glasses to put on, so you can see another virtual reality in the virtual reality that you're already present in. So, as far as the principle is concerned, I don't see any distinction at all. I mean, if it's like if people are tired of one movie, they go and see another movie. People are getting tired of this virtual reality. They want to escape from it. And this modern forms of digital or virtual realities are kind of an escape for some time. You cannot forever remain into that virtual reality. It's kind of an escape until you can come back and be in this kind of a more natural virtual reality, and then now and then go into this artificial virtual reality.
So, Manu, would you classify it?
Yeah. What Vedanta says is a more permanent, if you are sick of this virtual reality, a more permanent reality already, a more permanent way already exists. Just be free. Look in your heart, remove all the layers before you, and then you just be your true self, and all virtual reality will disappear forever. If you want it to disappear. If you don't want it to disappear, enjoy all the diversity that's around you.
Right. So, Maharaj, just going back before we go to the next point. So, would you then probably classify this concept of this virtual world probably more under this Babaharika Satyam rather than Pratibhashika, that it's part of
No,
our
I,
transactional
no,
reality?
I am no. I would put it under Pratibhasika.
Gotcha.
One way to distinguish between Pratibhasika and Vyavaharika, the apparent reality and relative reality, is that it's possible to know the truth. If you can know the truth, or if you can see the real without knowing Brahman, then that is Pratibhasika reality. If you can see the truth only after realizing Brahman, then that is a Vyavaharika reality. And so, in order for the dream reality to disappear, I don't need to know Brahman. I just need to wake up and know the waking world.
Right.
But in order for this experience to disappear, I need to realize Brahman. And so that is why you could say that this experience is relatively real. If you want to make a distinction between waking and dream, that would be one way to distinguish it. That the dream world can be removed only by waking up and coming to this waking world. But this waking experience can disappear totally only after realizing Brahman. Now, that's still a provisional way of describing it, because, as I said, from a different perspective, there is really no distinction between waking and dream.
Okay. Okay, Maharaj. So we're coming. So before we conclude, it's 8. Okay, we still have time. So Maharaj, can you now you've given this really a really wonderful lucid way of the theory of Advaita Vedanta. Can you talk about like one question that many people had for you is that this all sounds nice, even what you've described sounds very nice, but when tension and conflict comes into our lives, at that time the ego naturally becomes very strong. So can you please give some suggestions how to is it possible, first of all, the question, is it actually possible to put this type of vichara, can it actually help us in our day-to-day life in the midst of conflict?
Absolutely. Of course it's possible. I mean, if it's not possible, why even talk about it? Of course it's possible. No, it's difficult. It's not easy. Otherwise, we would be just, everyone would be enlightened in just 2 days of vichara. It doesn't happen that way generally, but it's definitely possible. Now, vichara is not just kind of sitting and reading some Upanishads and then just talking about it and discussing it and arguing about it and thinking about it. Vichara, there has to be a preparation for vichara. And a preparation includes all these, the four, for instance, viveka, vairagya, then shamadama, uparati, titiksha, the four basic disciplines required in order for even vichara to succeed. And so practicing those, being fit for vichara, is the first preparatory discipline that every one of us has to do before coming to vichara. I think the mistake that many of us do is we try to attempt vichara before being fit for it. And if we attempt vichara before being fit for it, then of course it's not going to appear very practical. Of course it's going to say, well, it doesn't really help. Tell us something practical. And I mean, the word practical itself is problematic. It's like what's practical for one person may not be practical for another. And so I think what we need to do is to find a way that best fits our own temperament, our present temperament. We can't say our temperament is permanent. It will evolve. As we evolve, our understanding evolves. As we evolve, what makes sense to us, those things evolve. So it's not about even putting like non-dual thing as something like high. I mean, sometimes people just put Dvaita, Vishishta Dvaita, Advaita, and somehow non-duality at the top of the ladder. Well, you just make the ladder upside down and the whole thing changes. So I don't think, it's not the point about which is higher or which is lower. I don't think it's that. I think we need to find a way that best resonates with us. It could be Dvaita, it could be Vishishta Dvaita, it could be Advaita. We are all like rivers going to the ocean. And it doesn't matter which path we take to reach the ocean. Ultimately, we have to reach the ocean. And it's possible that some people might start with Dvaita and reach the ocean. Some people might do it with the Vishishta Dvaita. Some people would do it with Advaita. And so therefore, this kind of that's the a part of our ignorance, is being competitive about it. And Advaita is fighting with Dvaita and saying, like, we are better than you, we are higher than you, this is better. That's ridiculous. I think, why not just choose what makes sense to you and follow it. Start walking. If I just keep on arguing, I'm just going to be where I am. But if I start walking, then there is a chance that at some point I will reach the destination. And I think that's more important. That's why I'm not sure, but I think maybe Swami Turiyananda, or my memory fails right now, but one of the direct disciples said that a dualist with spiritual experience is better than a non-dualist without any spiritual experience. We can keep on singing the glories of non-duality all through our life and experience nothing. On the other hand, there's this sincere devotee who prays and worships, does japa regularly, and experiences the presence of God. That person is far superior than someone who is just talking about it. And that's why Swamiji said that an ounce of practice is worth tons of theory. And ultimately, what will make the difference is what we have experienced in life. Not how many books we have read, not how much scriptures we know, not how many blah, 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 nothing. Ultimately, what I have experienced. You see? And that's why Shankaracharya says, Samprapte sannihite kale, nahi nahi rakshati dukrang karane. That when that hour of death comes, all these other false masks and egos, everything that we have accumulated around ourselves, that will all disappear. At that time, your knowledge of scriptures itself, all this intellectual stuff, not going to help. What will help, what will go beyond that ultimate death, which will come sooner or later, maybe sooner than later, is what I am as a being. Have I changed? Has something in my heart changed? That'll what make the difference. And I think that's what we have to. And that's why in Sri Ramakrishna's teaching, Mother's teachings, Swamiji's teachings, the religion is realization. Religion is not just believing in something. Religion is not just arguing about something. It's actually experiencing something. So we have to really ask ourselves, how much have I changed? Have I changed? And is that change for the better? Yeah, those are some of the thoughts that come to my mind when you ask that question.
Maharaj, we have one question from the private chat on YouTube. Let's see. Swamiji Pranam, my question is that it's often said in the context of Jnana Yoga that the world is not real. What is meant by this? Kindly remove my doubt.
I think we already answered that question, didn't we?
Yeah, we did answer it.
Yeah.
So very good. Very good. One more question is there. Give the other question. Where? Maharaj, when Thakur said Tomare Chaitanya Hok on January 1st, 1886, is he encouraging and blessing us to move on the path of Advaita alone, or is he integrating the three margas?
Well, what Sri Ramakrishna, you see, what Sri Ramakrishna meant, I think Sri Ramakrishna only knows. So, and I'm reading about it in the books, just like you and all of us are reading in the books. And we are free to interpret his words in the way that best resonate with us. When I read those words, it appears to me that Sri Ramakrishna is saying, live mindfully, be conscious, don't lead a mechanical life. Tomader chaitanya ho. Chaitanya means being awake. And we just now spoke about, although we might make the distinction between waking dream and deep sleep, from the highest spiritual standpoint, we are not really awake. And so Tomader Chaitanya ho can be understood as be awake to this higher, deeper reality in us and around us. And so I would hesitate to needlessly bring Advaita, Vishishtadvaita, Dvaita into those words which are just direct. Sri Ramakrishna was not giving a very philosophical exposition there. You're just saying, be awake and see the real. And that reality can appear to you. For some, that reality can appear in the form of Krishna or Rama or Shiva or Jesus or Buddha, or to some that reality might come as a kind of an infinite conscious being. We don't know. That reality can appear in infinite number of ways. And who are we to decide that God can only be formless or only with form? We have no business to decide and define that. We just have to be awake, open our eyes, and experience that reality in whichever way that reality chooses to reveal itself before us.
Very good. Okay, Maharaj, very good. Are there any more questions? One more question. Give it. Okay, Kiran K wrote, Maharaj, how to realize that this physical world that we experience is just another dream. Please give us practical ways that we can follow in our daily lives.
Yeah, that's a good question. But before I answer that question, just a small comment. I think no need to say, give us a practical ways, which kind of makes me feel like all that I've been saying up to this point was not very practical. So of course, I mean, religion is not religion if it's not practical, if it can't be practiced. So yeah, at least my effort, and I think the way we all try to understand spirituality is something that can be practiced. Sure. Now, how to see this is a dream is one way would be not just looking out, looking at our own personality. As long as I see my own form, my own physical being as very real, of course the world is going to appear real. All the forms are going to appear real. What we see outside is only an expression of who we are inside. So as long as I cling to my own form, I will not be able to let go of these forms that I see outside. As long as I cling to my own physical being, all of these physical entities I see around me are going to appear very real. And so the best way, in my opinion, is to see my own body, mind, being itself as not the real me. Once I live and move and talk and think and relate with other people with this awareness that in reality, I am the Atman, I am the infinite self, with apparent discovering over body, mind over me. So the more I try to change my self-perception of myself, my perception of the world will also change. I cannot remain real and try to think the world is unreal. Just doesn't work that way.
Why don't you give some,
changing my own perception? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
All right, why don't you, just to follow up on that, why don't you give some, are there any practices you can give for changing the self-perception, which is a very important point you mentioned? Any tips you want to give to our listeners, habits, how to change that self-perception?
Well, a practical tip would be stop looking into the mirror more often. Because the more I look into the mirror, I mean, what do I see in a mirror? You see the reflection of the body, and I feel that's who I am. So, well, I mean, this is because we were just not talking about doing something very practical about it. But it's not just about not, you may not have any mirror at home and you might still be very attached to your body. So it's not just that if you remove the mirror, the problem is solved. But nevertheless, to consciously live, if I can remind myself as often as I can that I'm not Let me put it this way. Sri Ramakrishna speaks about the ripe eye and the unripe eye. And those of us, most of us, I believe, here have read the Gospel of Ramakrishna. We know what he meant by using those terms. And one thing we could do is, in terms of ego, it's possible to kind of subdivide the ego into a primary ego and a secondary ego. And a primary ego would be everything that I identify as I. That's the primary ego. But there are a lot of things I identify as mine, as belonging to me. That would be the secondary ego. And if we have to ever choose between me or mine, and we can choose only one, we'll always choose me. Example, for instance, now, if I say buy a new phone, you got an expensive phone, you buy a new phone, and you are just walking home. And it's a solitary road, you're just by yourself, and suddenly someone comes, holds a gun, and says, give that new phone to me, your phone or your life. So what are we going to choose? Are we going to think like, oh my God, I can't give my phone. I've spent so much on it. I love this phone. Take my life. I'm not going to keep my phone. We're not going to do that. Because at that particular moment, this is me and the phone is mine. So if I have to choose between the two, I'll easily let go of what is mine to preserve that who is me. And so we see that, therefore, this secondary ego, that which is mine, has a relatively less hold over me than the primary ego. And so one practice that we all can indulge in is to try to convert my body and mind into the secondary ego. So people say, oh, I'm Brahman. That's fine. But right now, if you want to be practical about it, just say, I see the body, I see the mind. This is my body. This is my mind. Just like this is my computer, this is my car, this is my tree, this is my garden. And that's fine. But that's not me. So the first helpful step would be to, just like you take good care of the things that belong to you, take good care of your home, you would take good care of your family. So take good care of your body, take good care of your mind, because they are yours. But that way, the hold of the body and mind over me will become less. And try to, every time you even unconsciously tend to think of the body and mind as me, kind of remind yourself a little bit in the mind, no, that's not really me. Now, you don't have to change your language. I mean, you can still use the word I'm sitting, I'm talking, but every time you use the word I, a kind of a bell should go inside the heart saying, yeah, okay, but that's not really I. The real I is the Atman. And that, I think that kind of a practice does help a lot. So give it a try and see.
Very good. Very good. Excellent. Any other questions? Okay, there's no other questions, Maharaj. Okay, before I close and... Oh, one more question. Where's the other question? Maharaj-ji, the insurmountable challenge seems to be of moving from Grihastha stage to Vanaprastha. How can we disentangle ourselves from this challenge and progress spiritually? Please guide.
First of all, it's not an insurmountable challenge, because if it's insurmountable, then no suggestion will work. So it is surmountable, first of all. And secondly, I think if we remember that whatever stages we are passing through, Grihastha, Vanaprastha, whatever stage, ultimately there's going to be death. We may prolong one stage or remain stuck in some stage, but because of that, death is not going to wait. Death is not going to say there are 4 stages of life. This person is kind of stuck on the second stage, so I have to wait now for the 4th stage before I go. No, the death can come at any time in our lives. And if I remember that death can come, then the choices I make, the decisions I take will be more mature, more wise. So it's not just about going from one stage to another stage and when I should do it, but say, whenever you choose to do it, remember, death is waiting. And whenever that death comes, do you go smiling or do you go crying? There is, I think it was Kabir's one saying is that when I came into this world, I was crying. That's what a baby does. The first thing a baby does is cry. In fact, if the baby doesn't cry immediately after birth, everyone is afraid. Like, is it a stillborn baby? They'll kind of hold the baby upside down and kind of beat it here and there to make the baby cry. And as soon as the baby cries, you can see in the traditional movies and other places, as soon as they hear there is a baby being born, as soon as they hear the cry of the baby, everyone celebrate. Finally the child is born. It's kind of sad that life begins with crying. It's as if like the baby is like, oh my God, I've come into this world. Now I've just got to cry the rest of my life. So crying seems to be a sign of life. And yet, when I cry as a baby, everyone in the family is celebrating that there is a birth of a baby in the family. Now, let me live my life in such a way that when it's time to go, I will be smiling and everyone else will be crying. What a tragedy it will be that even at the time of death, it happens exactly at the time of birth, that I am still crying, oh, I don't want to die. And people are celebrating, oh, good gracious, this wretched fellow has gone. We don't want that to happen. And therefore, think about death. In fact, one practical advice, and I know death is a very unpleasant subject, but one way would be try to think every day could be your last day of your life. When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, this could be the last day of my life. One day you're going to be right. You don't want that day to come too quickly, but one day you're going to be right. But if I think that this is the last day of my life, that day I wouldn't want to fight with anyone. I wouldn't want to hurt anyone. I wouldn't want to go and be very selfish. I want to be helpful. I want to be loving, because that is the last day of my life. And the next day that I go to sleep that night, I wake up in the morning and find I'm still here and not on Chandraloka or Suryaloka. That means God has given me another chance to live 24 more hours so that I can do something better. So thinking about death is the best way to awaken to our higher calling in life.
Excellent, Maharaj. Maharaj, okay, I want to thank you so much, Maharaj. It's been a great delight. And I just want to just show a couple of books to the audience before we sign off. Maharaj has recently published 2 books. One is, I don't know if you can see right there. It's Walking the Walk. It's a manual on karma yoga. And the link is on our website if you would like to purchase the books. And the other is, and we'll show the link afterwards. And the other is Knowing the Knower, a manual on Jnana Yoga. We're going to show the link afterwards, so don't. And Maharaj, I will put Maharaj back on. Maharaj, and I hear that you have another book that has just come out. Can you?
Yeah, it is a translation of the Viveka Chudamani. The book is titled Looking Deeply, Vivek Chudamani of Sri Shankaracharya. It's available in Amazon, all stores. I think in India, only the Kindle version is available. But in several other parts of the world, the local store, the regional Amazon stores also stock the print version of the book, the paperback.
So it is available in India on Kindle.
Kindle, yeah.
Okay, we can try to see that. We'll try to put that link on with your talk so people can get to that. Okay, well, at the end we'll show the 2 books. Okay, here's the 2 books, and you can purchase this from our Advaita Ashram website. Okay, go back to Maharaj. So Maharaj, on behalf of Advaita Ashram and our devotees, I want to thank you so much. And I also just want to tell the devotees that what a treat it's been. Swamiji talked about presenting Vedanta in a language that even a child could understand. Maharaj not only does that, but I think what he does in Bangla, one word is there, noram. When we hear Maharaj, he uses such wit and humor that it's easy to digest these highest Vedantic teachings. And he also, again, like I said, even though he's a Sanskrit scholar, he puts things in such a lucid, simple way, and tries to make practical exercises which we can follow and implement in our daily lives. I would advise those who have watched and those who are going to watch, please watch this a few times and think about it, and let's try to put these principles in practice in our daily life. Maharaj, I would request on behalf of Advaita Ashram that we would like you to come again sometime this year, Maharaj. We would be delighted to have you on another program as well.
Thank you.
And Maharaj, before I ask him to give the closing chant, anything else? Okay. After Maharaj gives his closing chant, we're going to have a video, just a video on our new issue of Prabuddha Bharata. Huh? Oh, it's not there. Okay. So anyways, just once again, if those of you are interested, please subscribe for the digital subscription, and also our new Living a Meaningful Life in a Digital World, the January special issue of 2022. Maharaj, I request you to kindly give us a closing chant and bless us all.
Om Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhurmuhu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.
Thank you, Maharaj.